started today, and before we descend into our usual abyss of negativity, can I say two positive things?
Certainly.
I know everybody doesn't feel the same way about the first thing.
Yeah.
It's going to be almost 90 today,
I know.
90 tomorrow.
Very
you
exciting.
and I love it.
Very
That's
exciting.
You know what's more exciting?
What's more exciting?
I know we're going to talk about this tomorrow. Have you seen the photographs from the James Webb telescope?
Just on television, but we're going to talk about it tomorrow. I'm so excited.
It is I was going to say otherworldly. I guess that's
Yep.
a pun, unintended. I assume everybody's seen them. They are just incredibly
Yeah.
beautiful.
And may I point something out?
You may.
For all those people who think you have to be cracked to talk about visits from aliens, what they see out there? All these little planets with the possibility of life, Jim.
With aliens on
So
them.
for all the people that
Yeah.
said they've been beamed up and probed, and you ridiculed them,
Yeah.
you could be wrong.
Can I tell you something? I know more pod people than I know regular people. In any case, that's the positivity for the day. Today, as I'm sure you know, even if you won't admit it, is Amazon Prime Day, or at least one of 2 days. What started as a way to celebrate Amazon Prime members with exclusive deals has transformed into a full-scale shopping event as the service has grown to exponential numbers. But as we also know, while consumers may get $3 off things like sunscreen and maybe even shoe stretchers, while warehouse workers break their
Shoe
backs.
stretchers?
Maybe somebody I know ordered shoe stretchers the other day. To fulfill our orders, the real winner, get this, Marjorie, our colleague Zoe looked this up this morning. In 2019, Business Insider calculated that he earns roughly and this is not revenue, personal earnings, $2,500 every second he is alive.
It's tough.
So our lines are open for you to vent your hypocrisy about how we'll never buy another thing from Amazon, only to see the deals pop up on Prime Day and be persuaded. Or if you want to set us straight, are you one of those people who does what you say you're going to do and you only patronize small local businesses unless you really have no choice? Give us a call or text us 877-301-8097. We also should have said, obviously, at 1 o'clock today, we'll bring to you live to its conclusion, Day 7? Day 7.
I think so.
Day 7 of the January 6th House Select Committee hearings. So, Marjorie, it is now 11:08. Have you been on Amazon Prime yet
Well,
today?
I was on vacation last week, Jim, so
I
I'm
was
kind
aware
of
of that.
behind on the news, and I did not realize until this morning that it was Amazon Prime Day, so I've not exactly plotted my strategy, although I must admit I'm very hypocritical. I do shop on Amazon. I wish I were a better person, and I did not, because I don't think they're a very good company. On the other hand, I'm better than my neighbors downstairs who's shopping on them all the time, so I feel like I could at least be better than they are. But I think the more interesting question to ask
Is what?
is you with
What's that?
the shoe stretcher. Now, people that have listened to us for a long time know that Jim suffers from a malady.
Let's not start this. It's not a malady, first of all, and don't go down this route again.
Morton's toe.
Morton's toe, by the way, which I do not have, is when your second toe is longer than your big toe.
That's
It is
right.
not a malady. A lot of people have it, and I don't have it.
Okay.
So I don't know where this came from. But regardless, here's the issue, if I may. I shouldn't have brought it up. I bought a pair of shoes the other day, and not on Amazon, by the way, a local
that's good.
retailer.
Yep.
The right shoe is not as big as it should be. But rather than getting rid of them for $19, actually for $25.
So they're two different size shoes? Is this what you're
Well, I
telling
may
me?
have 2 different size feet.
You have
But for
two-
$25,
okay.
I got a shoe stretcher. And then I go on the damn Amazon website this morning for Amazon Prime. You know what it's today?
You told me $19.
$19.79. $5
$5
less.
difference. Okay.
I
that's
shouldn't have
huge.
bought it there. By the way, the only reason I bought this is not true. I was going to say the only reason I bought the shoe stretcher was because I couldn't find one in Cambridge. It's not true. I didn't look. 877-301-8097. You want to hear another statistic before
What?
we get into this with our listeners? Guess how many Amazon Prime members there are in the United States of America? Now, by the way, this is members. And when I give you the number about how many members, obviously, if you belong, my whole family's on mine.
Correct.
I assume your whole family is on yours. So this is the number of members. It doesn't say 3 in Marjorie Egan's house, X number in Jim
I
Browder's
have no
house.
idea. I'm going to guess 100 million.
148 million people.
So that's half the country.
In the United States. Well, it's half the country if it covered the whole household. But in light of the fact that, as I say, one membership can cover a whole family. That's essentially that virtually everybody in the United States of America has that. I don't even know what it costs. Was it $130 a year or
I
whatever
don't
it is?
know.
I mean, it's just insane.
I don't know.
877-301-8970. And by the way, if anybody, we want to be open-minded and even-handed about this. If anybody is not troubled by the fact that Jeff Bezos makes a mere $2,500 a second, because I assume some of you think he's got to feed his family, obviously.
Obviously.
That is, will entertain your thoughts too. 877-301-8970. That's the text number too, by the way.
We also worry about people that work for Amazon because it's nonstop
Did you read the story?
controversy. Yes, about what it's like to work in an Amazon warehouse during Prime Day. Well, I guess it's hell. It's basically Dante's Inferno down there at the Amazon warehouse. They have to work much more. Instead of their 10-hour shift, which is a long shift,
to begin with,
mandatory 11 hours a day. And some of these Amazon warehouses...
And an extra day, Marjorie. 11 hours a day, mandatory, as you said, and an extra day.
Some of these warehouses are the equivalent of 28 football fields. They talk about it being like a workout every day where they can barely sit down to get 20 minutes to eat their food, which they have to heat up in 2 seconds to eat it and then go back running up and down the 28 football fields. So, none of us should be shopping there, but I do, I must admit.
By the way, it's gotten to the point where before you hit submit, the package is at your house. Do you know? It's like somebody, Jeff Bezos' cousin, is reading your mind, and before you hit submit or whatever the verb is.
Last week, I was trying to get some a product that I could not find at my supermarket, and I did the Amazon Fresh thing, and it was there, Jim. It was there in an hour.
Well, here, can I just read you a couple of texts before you go? Here's an honest person. Are you kidding? 100 cups, K-cups for $20. That's 20-cent cup of coffee. I bought 2 boxes. That's the problem, by the way. On the other end, this is an interesting question that I can't answer, and I apologize. Jim, isn't the purpose of buying shoes in person to make sure that they fit? Which actually is a very fine point. Let's go to Brighton, where Nick is on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about Amazon Prime. Actually, days, not day. It's today and tomorrow. Hi, Nick. What's up?
Hey there. So my wife and I actually made the move to cancel all that membership a long time ago.
Good for you.
And I guess the only thing I would say to most people is you probably don't need the majority of what you buy on this with the speed and convenience you do. And just remember that every time you do that 2-day shipping or whatever, all of that crap ends up in a landfill. And you're just adding to that glut. Now, that being said, I have bad retail habits. I'll go to the Booksmith and walk out with $50 of used books I do not need and will not read. But I just I usually use the rule of if I think on a purchase for a day and I forget about it, it's probably destined that it doesn't belong in my house and I don't need it that quickly or that immediately.
Okay, Nick, here's my feeble excuse, and I admit it's a feeble excuse for why I continue to buy stuff from Amazon, because a lot of the stuff is just not in the supermarket, or it's not at Target, or it's not...
What's the last thing you bought that you couldn't get at a local store? First of all, Target is not a small local business.
The lactose-free yogurt. The only place I found it was on Amazon. Or there's little things you stick in your dishwasher or your washing machine to clean the fresh things.
That is total crap.
It's not total crap.
So,
It's
Nick,
absolutely.
what do you say to Marjorie's...
You asked me for the 2 things, and those are the 2 things.
I love listening to you, too, because Marjorie sounds like the excuse I'll make for people, and then Jim sounds like the inner dialogue in my head of just when I can't stand it.
So, Nick, you don't think I needed the shoe stretcher on Sunday night? Nick, that was unfortunate. Go ahead.
It is up to you what you need, and I'm not going to tell people you got to do what you got to do for your family.
Are you like a shrink when you're not calling the show? You're the worst call we could have because you're exactly the way we should be living. Good for you.
No, Jim, if anything, I'm like you. I'm a perpetual grump about everything. I'm just very calm and collected because I'm trying to sound like I'm very exciting.
Nick, that was a great call. Thanks for making it. By the way, we have a number of people who say that they've done what Nick and his wife have done, which is sworn off the thing. On the other hand, here's Denise from Marlboro. I'd like to think I'm a better person, but I'm not. I made my first Prime Day purchase at 12:30 a.m. this morning. I mean... Well,
there you go.
You know what that's like? It's like, remember when Black Friday used to be a big thing?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not a big thing because of online purchasing anymore. We used to do shows when web purchasing was much less of a thing. And we'd have people call us from being in line where they've stood there for like 22 hours
with their tents.
to save $7 on a microwave.
They got peanut butter sandwiches and they're sleeping all night in the parking lot. Laura from Sutton says, looking at Jeff Bezos brings to mind the old adage, money can't buy happiness. I don't know, Jim. Do you think Jeff Bezos is happy? Exactly. I'm asking you the question.
I don't know the guy.
I see he looked pretty happy when the spaceship landed or took off, his weirdly shaped spaceship. And he looked pretty good New Year's Eve when he was standing on that yacht in a really tight pair of pants and a really tight shirt with some good-looking woman, not his wife.
Well, you know, by the way, speaking of his wife, his former wife has done to philanthropy things. I assume people, we've talked about this on the show. She does one of these things where not only she do huge, multi-billion-dollar giving every year, she does not require all the kind of, I mean, I used to run a nonprofit. You get a foundation grant, you're thrilled. Then the reporting that you have to do to justify the amount, and I understand that, is so intense you almost don't want the grant. Her attitude is, if we investigated you and you're the right place to go, spend the money, we trust you to do the right thing. I mean, she really is, she's amazing, actually. This is his ex-wife. I don't know anything about his current
ex-wife, that's right. Well, that was why he's with the woman on the boat in the tight pants.
I thought you said it wasn't his wife.
It wasn't his wife.
Well, he's married again.
Oh, he's married again? He married the woman on the boat?
Can someone check that, by the way?
I did not know he was married again.
By the way, every conversation on this show degenerates into something like this. We're trying to talk about Prime Day, and now we're talking about Jeff Bezos' personal behavior.
Here's someone that talks about living, okay, this person lives in Scituate. It takes 25 minutes to get anywhere, so the next day, same-day delivery is hard to resist. I mean, that's another reason people do Amazon, because it's so easy to
But, you know, Nick from Brighton made a good... You know that guy we had on yesterday, Adam Chandler, the guy who writes about how disruptors often don't live up to expectations? The vast majority of stuff that you're excited by because you can get in 24 hours or less, do you really need it, as Nick said, in 24 hours or less? 9 times out of 10,
you can do the Saturday.
I would say the answer is no.
You can do the Saturday thing. So everything comes in one package on Saturday.
I didn't know you could
Yes,
do
you
that.
can. You can do that all the time. Yeah. So
what are you laughing about?
Well, this is from Robin from Shrewsbury. Don't bother me. I'm at work right now, listening to Jim and Marjorie on my earbuds, shopping on Prime. Luckily, I can do 3 things at once: work, shop, and listen to the radio.
I think 2 is probably true. Nola, I don't know if I pronounce it right. You're in Acton. You're on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for your call. Hi.
Hi. Let me turn off the radio so I don't have that in the background.
Thank you.
Yes. Now, maybe I'm not typical because in some ways it's not tempting. I've never been a Prime customer, and I loathe shopping whether online or in person. So I may be an outlier in that way. But when I first heard about Amazon, I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever it was, and great book things, I thought, oh, this is wonderful. And then a number of years ago, I can't tell you how long, but definitely 2 or 3 years before COVID, the New Yorker ran an article on how Amazon got where it was, and included such things as apparently Bezos managed to persuade his supporters to back, even though he wasn't earning money for a while, and he could buy out all these other booksellers. So you go online, you think, well, I won't do Amazon, but if you look at the fine print, Amazon controls several of the other ones. So
well, they basically put brick-and-mortar bookstores, with some wonderful exceptions, Brookline Booksmith, Harvard Bookstore. I mean, they put the vast majority of them out of business, and that was his disrupting tactic. And
well, exactly. And this was all long before we heard about how he treats his employees, and he doesn't care if they burn out. He doesn't want people... as I understand it, to work for him 2 or 3 years, come in and
no, we got it. Your analysis is totally right. Not to mention locking them in warehouses, which is a bit of an issue. I don't know if he does that anymore. Nola, thank you for the call. By the way, his girlfriend, he's not married. I was wrong. It's Lauren Sanchez, whoever she is.
Yeah, she was on the boat.
Okay, but so it was the woman who was on the boat.
So.
Okay,
I believe so. Yeah, Joanna in Salem says a lot of retailers are matching sales at Prime Day, so make sure to check before ordering through Amazon. Go to a real company instead. And they do point this out in these various stories. There's 5 Amazon Prime Day sales traps to avoid, and one of them is don't forget to comparison shop, Best Buy, Target, Walmart, etc.
But the flip side is you also read in that tips thing that you can program your Alexa to
I know.
that it
Yeah.
not only, if you give it a wish list, it can notify you when one of the items on your wish list is for sale, and this gets even worse, it can buy the damn item even without consulting if you've given it instructions.
That's right.
To just go
so
get
how does
it.
that work? You get home from work and your Alexa tells you everything it bought while you were at the office?
Apparently, and it opens the stuff for you too. Bernard, you're in Middleton. You're on Boston Public Radio. What's up with you?
Hi there.
Hey.
So a long-time Amazon customer and a Prime member, we kind of stopped buying stuff because of the amount of packaging.
Yeah. Well, you're good for the environment,
That's a
Bernard.
good point.
Yeah. My best use of Amazon is I use our local bookstore, but I use Amazon to do the searching and then go buy the stuff in the local bookstore.
Well, unfortunately, you are the opposite of too many of us who go to the local bookstore or the local retailer, do some searching and find out what the price is on Amazon, and sadly it's often less. What's that called? There's a word for that. I can't think of what that's
I don't know,
called. But it's horrible. But good for you, Bernard. You're doing the honorable thing. Thank you for calling us.
One of my closest friends ran a toy store, and people would come in and they'd ask her all these questions, what the hot toy was for 3-year-olds or
talking
6-year-olds, whatever, go all over, look at all the toys. And then after she gave them all that help, they would leave and go buy it on Amazon.
It's horrible.
It is horrible. Anyway, we're talking about the horrors of Amazon, even though a lot of us are...
By the way, would you have bought the shoe stretcher if you were me or not? I mean, I bought the shoes. I thought they fit. The right one didn't, was a little tight.
Yeah.
And I bought the shoe stretcher.
Usually, if I go and buy a pair of shoes and one of them is tighter than the other, I don't buy the shoes.
Well, I didn't
Jim.
know that they were tight. I was in a rush. And they
'Cause you didn't
felt
try them
fine.
on.
No, I did
Yeah.
try them on, actually.
I'm excited about a good deal I saw in Aquaphor.
What is that? What is it?
They've got a big Prime.
What is
Amazon
that?
Prime. It's like Vaseline.
Oh, I don't know
It's like
about
a oily skin.
Well, show
thing.
will be over in a couple hours. You can get to it.
Okay, we're talking about Amazon Prime. The number's 877-301-8970. Is Amazon Prime Day? Are you just selling out and buying everything you can, or are you being like a lot of our listeners, very concerned about the environment and doing the right thing and not shopping there? 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Newport Mansions, presenting Anything You Want, a closer look at treasures from Newport's Gilded Age. On view now at Rosecliff and included with admission. Learn more at newportmansions.org. And Sunbug Solar, offering solar and battery storage renewable energy solutions for your home or business. To learn how you can build a more resilient future, you can visit sunbugsolar.com. And Little Leaf Farms, committed to transforming the way food is grown in New England. Fresh lettuce harvested daily in Massachusetts all year round. It's the local lettuce locals love. Learn more at littleleaffarms.com. And Blythewald, presenting the Music at Sunset Summer Concert Series, overlooking Narragansett Bay every Wednesday night from 6 to 8. You can find the full schedule at blythewald.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're at the Boston Public Library, as we are every Tuesday and Friday, and you can stream us at youtube.com/GBH News. It's Amazon Prime Day. It's actually 2 days. Amazon Prime Days is the first day we're talking about whether or not you're a hypocrite like we occasionally are, and despite bashing Jeff Bezos for his practices, employment practices, environmental practices, other things, you still use it, or are you honorable and discriminating like a bunch of our listeners have been in texters? I just did the math. It's 11/24. He's made $3.5 million. If this was a normal day, I assume he makes more on a Prime Day. Bezos' income,
Yeah.
I don't mean revenue, obviously, income, personal income, has gone up $3 million since we went on the air at 11 o'clock.
Well, we just got a text message from an Amazon driver.
Oh, that's a good one. Read
Yes,
that.
who says, I drive for Amazon, have for
That's a
almost
good
4
one.
years. You are trying to cost me and many others our jobs. I make a good living and choose this lifestyle. I think you are very unfair to Amazon. Well, I tell you, it is good to get a nice message supporting Amazon from an Amazon driver, because you hear a lot of complaining from Amazon drivers and warehouse workers. So there is at least one happy driver out there who wants us to shut up.
Did you see my show last night?
Yes, of course, Jim.
Of course you did. So I had Jeffrey Sonnenfeld and a couple of his colleagues from the Yale Chief Executive Leadership, whatever. They're the people who did that. We had them on the show for this. They did a wonderful thing about all the companies that are divesting from Russia after the invasion of Ukraine and some that aren't. They put together a list of 118 companies that have said, major companies in America that have said, we will pay women workers, if they're located in a state that has outlawed abortion, to go to a state where they can get an abortion. What is my point? Oh, Amazon is on the list. But when you read the fine print, it only applies to employees. This gets to and many of their workers are independent contractors. Yeah. So the rhetoric of the promise far exceeds the reality of the promise. Kat in Worcester, what's up?
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm gonna cut you on speaker.
Hi.
I'm a mom. I'm 30 years old. I didn't even know it was Prime Day until I started listening to your show.
Sorry about that.
That's how much I avoid Amazon. But no one in my house uses it. My parents don't use it.
Great.
No one that I know personally, because I've talked so much about how horrible Amazon is to them. But when I need a product, I try to find it in a store locally, or I search online for the company directly and see if I can purchase directly from their website, even if it costs a few more dollars.
Well, what is it, Kat, what is it about Amazon in particular that has caused you to be as principled a person as Marjorie and I are not?
I think it's larger than Amazon. I think it's the American consumerism, like at large. I try really hard to not purchase things that I don't need. A lot of times there's products that I come across that I'm like, oh, that would be great to have, but did I even want it before I knew it existed? So
that's a good one.
I've been getting along just fine without these products.
All right, hold on.
Good for you.
Hold on one second, Kat. Sometimes you know how it is. You know what you like to wear, and you go into a store and you see this dress and you think, that is the dress for me.
I can answer for Kat, and then we'll see what she says. She would say, buy something else that you like almost just as much.
I would say that almost doesn't happen to me because I try to avoid purchasing things on the spot. I'll look at it, I'll see it, and if I want it, like that other caller said, the next day or 2 days later, then I'll come back and get it.
Okay, how did you achieve this kind of state of mind, Kat?
Excellent question.
Because I see it and I think, oh my gosh, I better buy it before somebody else does. And then if I don't, I think about it for days. How did you get there?
Okay, to be 100% truthful, I grew up in a household where my mom is I would say in a nice term, a shopaholic, but you could take that further, and that's who she is. So I'm someone that, my whole adult life has been trying to become as minimalist as possible.
Wow.
And so that's the direction I've taken, and
Good
I
for
think
you.
Amazon just makes it too easy for people not to be mindful of what they bring into their life. Because it's what we own and we have forever, it ultimately is going to end up in the trash, even if we love it and we use it every day. So you have to just be really thoughtful about what you bring in.
You are really thoughtful. You are great, Kat. Thank you for. It's humiliating, but Kat, thank you for a terrific call. I'll tell you, to feed Kat's position, Mackenzie, our coworker, just wrote us a note. When my sister worked at the Amazon warehouse in Austin, as in Texas, they told her it was common for people to faint on the work floor because there was no air conditioning. I mean, is that unbelievable?
Yeah, you really wonder when you are. How much did you say is made through the course of this show? How
$3 million. A little more than $3 million.
Okay, you really wonder if you made $3 million in a half hour.
You could afford air conditioning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably, you probably could.
I think you probably
You know what I'm going to do, by the way, which I know is only a start, but Kat embarrassed me.
Very embarrassing.
I'm returning the shoe stretcher when it comes. I am. Maybe I'll extend the shoe a little bit, stretch the shoe first, but then I'm going to return the...
A lot of people are talking about living in rural areas or places it's far to go shop. Margot from Hancock, New Hampshire, she says, it's very rural there. Shop locally is a major event, and half the time you can't find what you're looking for. So she says, although I hate it, and myself a little bit, I use Amazon to get things I can't find in our rural setting.
Not that I'm living this way, but the response to that texter is there are smaller independent businesses that have websites too, like virtually all of them. And you can order that thing if there's not a store in your town, and maybe you'll have to pay a little shipping, which you don't with Amazon Prime. I can't tell you how high a percentage of people on our text have said things like Gene in Rhode Island. I have never bought a single thing from Amazon in my life, not one thing, and that's the truth. So having said that, you're aberrational, because as I said at the top of the show, 148 million either Americans or American households, whichever number it is colossal, are Amazon Prime members. Is that incredible? Amazon Prime is not cheap, by the way. It's something like $15 a month or
I don't know.
$139 a year or whatever it is. That's a huge amount of money. It's really incredible.
Lisa from Haverhill says, I'm not as annoyed with Bezos making an obscene amount of money as I am about the government enabling him to evade taxes on that money. And Amazon does not pay taxes, or they didn't. Is that still true?
I don't know but for a number of years they were paying nothing
Yeah.
despite billions in
A lot of people
profits.
think you need the Stu Stretcher, Jim, for your Morton's toe.
I don't
even though
have
you
Morton's
say you
toe.
don't have
By the
it.
way, just so it's known, it's not the length. A good shoe stretcher, which I learned over the weekend, not only extends the length if you need it, which I do not need, I need the top. It's got a little button on the stretcher, which causes the top to bottom of the shoe to create a little more space. It's too tight on the top of my
Okay.
foot.
Well, thank you.
Oh, it's okay. You're right. Why did I share that?
We were all wondering.
Kelly, I don't know where you're calling from. Begins with a G, but welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, first time, long time. I love you guys.
Thank
I'm
you.
calling from Groton, Mass.
Oh,
You're
Groton.
welcome.
Great. Nice to talk to you. Thanks for your first call. What's up?
I'm calling because just to build on what the other callers have talked about, the environmental impact and just trying to be a more conscious shopper. I try really much to think about the returns that I make. After a recent experience, I was at a Whole Foods making a return for items that were in packaging. As I watched the gentleman put each individual item into a bag and put them into a giant plastic bag. And I was like, what is that? And he goes, we go through 1,000 plastic bags a day to return all of the items that come back into the store.
Oh, my gosh.
Isn't that horrific? Like,
No, it is
even
horrific.
those things, it was a bathing suit. I had 2 bathing suits, 2 different sizes, already in plastic bags, and each individual item, even though they were in plastic and needed a sticker placed on it, those then went into a plastic bag.
You know, I'm
So
so
I think
glad.
this is really important to think about that.
So wait
Another-
a second. After that, was that the tipping point for you, so to speak, Kelly?
Well, that's a really good point because I have 2 boys. I'm busy. I work. I love Amazon for the convenience, but
Yeah.
I really I'm very environmentally conscious. I do a lot of recycling. I compost. I try to do all these different things.
for you.
And that really made me think about when I buy something, do I need to try it on in 2 different colors? Because I'm going to end up returning one. So just trying to be more conscious of what I get.
Hey,
Good
Kelly,
for you.
one question before you go. How much do you hate shopping for bathing suits?
Oh, Marjorie, they both went back.
It's really
2
brutal.
plastic bags or 1,
Really
Kelly?
brutal to shop for bathing suits.
That ended up being 4 plastic bags because they were in a plastic bag and then they each went into another plastic bag.
Kelly, you're an honest woman. Great first call. Do it again soon. Thank you very much. By the way, do you remember when he gave, was it $10 million to some environmental thing right after he'd done some horrible environmental thing? You know, speaking of that, I mentioned the analysis done out of Yale on playing both sides of the fence kind of thing in terms of Amazon. AT&T is on the list of companies that are funding women employees' trips to states that allow for an abortion. But you know what they're doing at the same time? They are the top donator of any American company to legislators
Yeah.
who passed or governors who signed trigger laws that outlaw abortion. So talk about playing both sides. It's AT&T, my friends, playing both sides of the fence.
We just got an email from David Sandberg, one of the owners of Porter Square Books in Cambridge.
Oh.
And he says, Jim, the phenomenon you referred to before is called showrooming.
That
where
is it,
people
showrooming.
Find something in a brick and mortar store, that's like my friend with the toy store, often with the help of a human bookseller or a clerk, and then they buy it online, which is really kind of creepy. But one bright note is that what we've seen a lot more of lately is the reverse. People coming into us in the bookstore and showing us an Amazon page on their phone and asking if we have that book. I think the pandemic did a lot to expose the truth of Amazon, and we were seeing that in our business a bit over the last 2 years.
Can I say something too? While you were on vacation last week, we had one of his workers in their news store in the Seaport on from Porter Square Books. When I mentioned the Harvard Square bookstore, it's great. Porter Square is fabulous. Just a fabulous independent bookstore. Not only great books, they have great speakers, great programs. Patronize them right there in that little Porter Square mall.
Didn't we just read somewhere in the last couple of days how bookstores are having a resurgence now?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Post the pandemic, people are back because they love to hang around bookstores and browsing. I think the Brookline Booksmith is a good place, kind of like a Match.com and Coolidge Corner. People hang around in the bookstore and check each other out.
Well, it's not only that. It's beyond the checking out thing. Isn't one of the great joys?
Yes.
It used to be one of the great joys to go to a bookstore and not only browse, but sit down in a bookstore and flip through books, which you really don't do very well in Bezos land, you know?
877-301-8970. John from Gardner. Hi, John.
Oh, by the way, Zoe says, John, 1 second, the first time I ever met the great Cy Montgomery was at an author event she did at Porter Square Books.
There you go.
One of our faves. I'm sorry, John. Take it away. Oh, hi, John. How are you?
Well, I'm well. How are you guys doing?
We're good. What's up? You too.
Well, a lot of golf is up, but beyond that, I will claim the moral high ground.
Oh, okay.
That I've never bought
John retired.
We
know John. John retired from state government employment at about 32
That's
years
right.
old, give
Like
or
all
take
my
a couple
cousins.
of weeks.
55.
Whatever.
55.
Whatever. Go ahead, John.
I will claim the moral high ground. I've never bought a single item from Amazon.
Yeah.
Now, there are two caveats.
Yeah.
Two caveats.
Yeah.
It's been said that I hate technology. I am afraid of technology. I'm a technophobe, so that might be a factor in this. And the other one is, I just forgot. What was the other one?
That's because you've been retired too long, John. You start to forget everything.
I know what. What do they say? That our economy is driven like 70% by consumers, something like that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yep.
I was the typical consumer, our economy would be supplied by consumers by about 0.07% because I'm not a big buyer of anything. And I was just lamenting, Jim, my old Russell Athletic and Champion T-shirts. You know, I have about a dozen of them. They're starting to become frayed and tattered. You go to buy a T-shirt these days, and they're crap.
What do you do for golf balls, John?
Any number. I usually find them in the woods. I use used balls.
You
guys
ball.
have a good one. Thanks.
Hey, John, it's good to talk to you. Thank you so much for the call.
Okay, here's the good one from John from Quincy. This is a good reason. He says he's blind. If you're a blind person, you can use it as much as you want. As John says, he uses Amazon Prime because he has to find a way to get to stores and find help in stores, which is virtually impossible. So Amazon's a godsend for people who are disabled. And that's
Okay,
true.
well, fine. Well, then we're nice to Amazon for that driver who was up. You know, by the way, speaking of drivers, this doesn't reflect on the driver. The special, who did the special on Amazon we talked about? Was it Frontline? I think it was a Frontline thing. We did a Frontline thing. Jeff Bezos and his fellow leaders designed the vans that Amazon delivers your local packages in so that they just fell by like a centimeter or something, smaller than the size that would make them personally liable under federal law if they hit a pedestrian or another car or something like that. So that has nothing to do with your driving, and we wish you success in your career, and we hope you make a lot of money for the driver who texted. But the guy, it's called, thank you, who just said that. You should check this out. It's a Frontline special, Amazon Empire, the rise and reign of Jeff Bezos. It really takes you inside. And you're going to tell us when Trenny's available, correct? Okay, Trenny's a couple of minutes late. Should be with us in a minute. Let's take another call. Judy, and we don't know where you're calling from either, but hello to you.
Hi, I'm calling from Northbridge.
Northbridge, nice to talk to you. What's up?
Well, I'm 78 years old, and I find Amazon delivering a big bag of dog food or a case of cat food is a godsend because even if I go to Walmart, to lift it, put it in the carriage, put it in the car, put it in the house, I get it delivered right to my step, and it's a real godsend as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you're the Judy. Thanks for the call. You're an exception. I mean, that's another exception.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's something that you really couldn't do or couldn't access were it not for Amazon, then you get a pass from the official Amazon. What are we?
Yeah, if you're older, you need help like that. If you're disabled, like John from Quincy, a couple of other people have said they also have disabilities. So they're
there's a third
love
exception
getting
which you've
stuff to
chosen
their
to
door.
ignore.
What's that?
Shoe stretchers. If you need a shoe stretcher
In an
and you
emergency.
need it fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or, if you need some more Aquifer, Jim, you never know when you're going to need Aquifer. In the middle of the night, you might
Is that
need
a
some.
brand, Aquifer? I'd never heard
Yeah,
of
it's
it.
like Vaseline.
I know you
It's
said that,
similar
but
to
I never
Vaseline
heard-
petroleum
I
jelly.
never heard of it.
Well, some people don't like Vaseline for whatever reasons. They like Aquifer better or something. I don't know.
Well, that's
Yeah,
really
it has a
interesting.
prettier package, I think, overall.
Does?
Yes, I do. I think it's like white.
Well, that woman,
blue
was her
and
name Kelly, would say
red.
the packaging, you shouldn't be celebrating the packaging. You know what I mean?
Well, it's the thing that you have to put the stuff in something.
For people of a certain age, our colleague and friend, Emily Rooney's father, Andy Rooney, used to do these wonderful bits at the end of 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe the most famous bit, I think, that he ever did
Packaging?
was when he gets,
It's great.
this is like, 30 years ago or something? He gets a package that is literally, gets an item he orders, not from Amazon, it's pre-Amazon, that he ordered from someplace that's got like 11 layers of plastic
hard
packaging.
plastic.
And it's great.
He's
And he
trying
spends
to
the whole
saw
thing
it.
exactly.
He has to come out
It's
like with a,
great.
like the kind of saw they use in the construction to get the damn package open. He's got the scissors, nothing works.
You can get that on YouTube, by the way. It's brilliant, and it holds up decades later. John and Lincoln, welcome to the show. We're waiting for Trenny, and so it's all you, John. Hello.
Okay, thanks. So I have shopped on Amazon a couple of times way back in the dark ages, but don't anymore.
Why?
And my main concern just too much consumerism, and I think Amazon is basically putting small business out of business by running everything through themselves, and people want it cheaper, and that cheapness is coming out of somebody's pocket, and it's not Jeff Bezos. But I also wanted to mention I've heard something, and maybe you guys can track this down, that I think it was Amazon that somebody wanted to return something, and they said, well, we'll just refund you the money. Don't bother returning it because it's just too much work. It's too much fuss and bother for us to restock it or do whatever. We got her. So it just seems like that's just the absolute end of consumerism.
By the way, you said you've heard that. I know a ton of people, and I do mean a ton, who've had that experience. I mean, like that woman who called before about the bathing suits and said she ordered 2 because she was hoping one would fit and return one. I don't know what happened in her circumstance, but I know a lot of things where the person you deal with at Amazon said it's not worth it to the company to pay for the return shipping. So keep it. And I'm sure you figured this out, John. A lot of people make a calculation when they order something that when they return it, which is their intention, the likelihood is good that Amazon's going to say keep it. John, thank you for your call. We appreciate it.
We're going to end with Betsy in Nashua,
What'd she
another
say?
honest woman. Publicly, I hate Amazon and Jeff Bezos. Secretly, I sent my daughter to college on capital gains from my Amazon stock.
Is that really true? Oh, that's...
We're all hypocrites, says Betsy. Well, not everybody. We have some that are genuinely
Before we break, he's made $5.5 million since we went on the air. Personally, $5.5 million. And that's assuming that he doesn't make more on Amazon Prime Days.
Okay. Up next, NBC Sports Boston reporter and anchor Trenny Kuznarek joins us to talk about the local football champs you've likely never heard of. She's next on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live, as we do every Tuesday and Friday, from the Boston Public Library.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Newbury Court, a full-service residential community in Concord, Massachusetts, for persons 62 or over, committed to creating an active, independent lifestyle. More at newburycourt.org or 978-369-5155. And Morningside Music Bridge, returning to Boston. The summer program shines a spotlight on young classical musicians from around the world, with concerts July 13th through 30th at New England Conservatory, mmb.international. And Comcast Business, offering Security Edge, an internet security solution that helps block threats like malware, ransomware, phishing, and botnet attacks across all connected devices. Restrictions apply. ComcastBusiness.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library. We're streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. Well, Boston just crowned another champion. The Boston Renegades won for the 4th year in a row. Here to tell you who the Boston Renegades are, if you don't know, is Trenny Kuznarek. She's an anchor reporter for NBC Sports Boston and a BPR contributor. Hey there, Trenny.
Hi, guys. Sorry I'm late.
It's okay.
my little puppy peed on the carpet.
Oh,
Which
that's right.
she hadn't done in like 10 days and the last 2 days. And she came right over and kind of looked at me and I was like, oh, you're so sweet just looking at your mommy. And then like 2 seconds later, she was squatting and peeing. And I was like, way to go!
Got to do what you got to do.
It's okay. It's okay. That's a good excuse. That's a very good excuse.
Actually
Tony.
not, but go ahead.
So I said going into the break that this is a local football championship team that most of us have never heard of. We've talked to you about them before. That's the only reason we have heard of them. But they're in this Boston Globe headline, the best in women's football, the Renegades.
They are. And they've really been the best in women's football up from the inception of the Women's Football Alliance. They have won 7 titles, 4 in a row. And they did this all, by the way, and I know this very intimately because she's also my trainer at the gym, without their starting quarterback who blew out her Achilles. She blew out her Achilles in one of the last games or a playoff game. And so they basically played in their championship game on Sunday without a quarterback. They had their tailback, their running back, sort of running the offense and just taking handoffs from the center. She ran for 124 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think they only threw for 27 yards, and they still beat the Minnesota Vixen 32-12. They were up 20-0.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. Like, listen, and I mean, these girls are just women. I shouldn't call them girls. These women are like legit athletes. They are really talented, skilled players. And as you can imagine, they don't get paid to play football. Their starting quarterback and their MVP quarterback is a trainer at a local gym. She's a personal trainer. And, all these women have different jobs. But, in talking to her and getting to know Allison, that's their quarterback, so much better over the last 9 months. One thing has really stuck with me in that she's like, I hope when people talk about us, they don't talk always about all the obstacles we have to face, but everything we're accomplishing. And like, she was in the best mood today that I've seen her since she blew out her Achilles like a month ago. Her voice was gone. She was so happy. She was still able to go to the game. They have a 5-year deal with Canton, Ohio, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So they play their championship games, the same place where the NFL opens their season every year with the Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio. And they're just they're really talented and they're really good and they know football. I mean, Allison's been playing football, the quarterback, for like over a decade. These are women who are passionate about the game and passionate about growing the game of tackle football. This is tackle football for women.
So how much do they get paid and who shows up to watch their games?
Don't get paid
anything, do they? They don't get paid anything.
Nothing.
To the best of my knowledge. They play their games. Oh, I should know this. I
just looked it up. Harry Della Russo Stadium in Revere.
But do they get
in Revere? That's right. Yeah. They play in Revere.
Do people show up to watch them? That's what I wonder. They do. That's good.
I mean, I don't think that they're selling. They're not selling out. Gillette Stadium or anything like that. But people do. I think people come and watch them because they're a good team.
Yeah.
Their championship game, Marjorie, was broadcast on ESPN too.
Good for them.
Really?
When I went and looked at their Instagram page yesterday to try and find video for our show. They had lots of people, posting pictures of them having a watch party at their house or being at a bar and asking them and the game being on in a bar. I'm sure it was being played, at the Sports Bra, which is that, of course, the all women's sports bar in Portland, Oregon. So listen, is it the NFL? No, but how many of you know who won whatever the new football league is that plays opposite of the NFL?
Yeah.
And the only reason I know that the Birmingham Stallions won that league is because somebody on my Instagram feed is like a reporter for them. But, I would say that the women's game has a chance to grow. I think just like anything else, the more young girls see that football is an option and a possibility, then that grows the sport, right? And I think that's really similar to where the WNBA was when it first started. That's really, I think, like who this league caters to are, young girls and young women who love football and have never thought that they've been able to play before.
But just one last thing about this. football's a dangerous sport, whether you're a man or a woman. You can get really hurt. We talk all the time about concussions and stuff like that. If to play for no money, and you all have to have a separate job, and you have to give up your time to go practice and stuff like that, I don't know. I don't know. Do you want to be playing such a dangerous game into your 20s and 30s if you get banged up? And I
mean, Allison's 41 and she blew out her Achilles, but she is like, hopefully I'm back for the start of next season to be the quarterback for the Renegades
it's just
again.
love of the game.
I think it's a love of the sport. And I will say too, Marjorie, listen, football obviously is a violent sport, but I think what often happens and I think we notice this also in basketball, fundamentals are better. And so I feel like, the women, and listen, they're not as big and strong and fast as an NFL player, right? Like your linebacker probably is even coming full speed, is not probably coming at you the speed that a linebacker in the NFL is coming in. And truth be told, I've never been to a Renegades game. But from what I understand, while there are injuries, I don't know that there are the severity of injuries that you see necessarily in the NFL in terms of concussions.
Why don't the three of us go to a Renegades game next season rather than just talking them up, which we are always doing?
We should put our money where our mouth is, Jim.
Staying with women athletes, let's talk for a minute about two who we have heard of. Unlike his wife, I can't get over this. Jill Biden, who's speaking yesterday, compared Latinos to tacos,
God, that was horrible.
Which is otherworldly horrible. Her husband, the president, I thought did a beautiful job when he's awarding the Presidential Medal of Freedom to 17 people, and among the 17 was Megan Rapinoe and Simone Biles. And the beautiful part of this is he didn't focus, if you listen to it, just on what an incredible soccer player Rapinoe is, how Biles is the single greatest Olympic gymnast of all time, but talked about the courage of Biles in helping to expose that abuser Nasser, who's hopefully in jail for the rest of his life, and for Rapinoe with her teammates leading the fight for pay equity for women in soccer and probably in other sports as well. So I thought it was actually beautiful. And Biles, by the way, is the youngest winner in American history of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So that was a pretty good deal, no?
And yes, and by 18 years, the next youngest is when Tiger Woods received it at 43 years old. And at that time, he was the youngest. And that would have been, I think Tiger is 46 or 47 now. So that was just a couple of years ago. But yes, Simone Biles at 25, the youngest by 18 years. And really, I feel like when this was announced, it really wasn't about what they achieved athletically. Because the Presidential Medal of Freedom is about so much more than what, listen, if you're that talented of an athlete, some of that is just innate genetics, right? It's hard work. I'm not taking that away from it, but there is something like, the average person is not probably going to be Megan Rapinoe, no matter how much you love soccer and how hard you work at soccer. But what was really focused on is Simone Biles' work for sexual assault victims, but also kids in foster care. Because if you know Simone Biles, story, her backstory, she was raised by her grandparents. And really is an advocate for kids in the foster care system. And then you have, of course, Megan Rapinoe, who fought along with her U.S. women's national team teammates to get a deal with U.S. soccer for pay equity alongside the men. But also she's a huge advocate of the LGBTQIA plus issues. She is a very vocal advocate for gay, lesbian, trans, non-binary kids, and really pushes the importance of acceptance of those kids in communities, particularly because they're just at such a higher risk for, mental health issues and suicidal ideation and whatnot. And same with sexual assault victims. I mean, we think about, part of why I think that gets sort of lost in the Simone Biles deciding not to drop out of the individual portion of the Olympics in Tokyo. What gets lost is that she talked a lot about the amount of stress that was put on her to have to get up in Washington and testify and relive being sexually assaulted by someone she was supposed to trust. And all of that compounded into a mental health crisis that then affected her ability to do her quote unquote job, which was to, be a gymnast. And that's, I think, what gets lost when we're praising her. It's not so much that she chose to compete or did not to compete because it wasn't best for her, but that she shed a light on the trauma that her and other elite athletes faced and how that can manifest itself even in the strongest, best athletes.
Can we we only have a couple minutes left because your dog peed on the rug. So can we spend a minute on Condoleezza?
She's real cute, though.
I bet she is.
How old is she?
She's 14 weeks and 1 day.
Okay, so she's just a baby.
Okay,
She can hold it, though, Marjorie.
She can hold
holds
it
all night long, so I don't know why she's
Unlike some people I know, but that's a whole other thing. Hey, Condoleezza Rice, everybody knows, former Secretary of State, obviously. A black woman, part of the ownership team, not the major part, but a part of the ownership team that is buying the Denver Broncos for a mere $4+ billion.
I know.
And for those who say, well, tokenism, because the NFL is taking a lot of crap for not having black or ownership, she actually has a long history and was apparently a finalist for the commissioner's job a few years ago. However, when I was reading the story this morning, the two stories I read not only said she was a finalist for the commissioner's job, but that she was being considered years ago for the head coaching job of the Cleveland Browns.
I think
really?
I think based on the story that I read that she wasn't actually in serious consideration for that. Like, it's a total difference of being on the administrative side, right? Like ownership or commissioner, as opposed to actually X's and O's. No, she was on the original competition committee, the head of the competition committee for the NCAA when they went to their new
championship format. Yeah,
the championship format. She wasn't on the ground level of that. And she sort of debunked that, I think, when she talked to the media about becoming an owner. But for her, I think listen, the more diversity and also, quite frankly, the more women we have in high-level positions in the NFL can only make the league better. That's, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a woman, but you think about what's happening right now with Deshaun Watson. I know at some point we'll talk about the punishment that he receives. But I think a lot of this goes overlooked and sort of tucked under the rug because there isn't a lot of consequences to face. And I'm hoping that having a woman like Condoleezza Rice in charge of a team, or at least in the room, right, on the board of a legendary NFL team, pushes other owners to think twice about who they sign and what they allow and what they'll tolerate from their players, regardless of their talent level.
Hey, Trini, we're almost out of time, but as long as you mentioned Deshaun Watson, he's a guy that was accused of sexually assaulting or a lot of these massage.
20-some women.
Yeah. What was his punishment?
There is no punishment yet.
There's no punishment yet.
Yeah,
okay.
No, we're waiting on that. They had the hearing, and there is an independent judge who's taking a look at the case. I'm blanking on her name. I think it might be Susan Johnson.
Okay.
So the NFL has asked for the harshest punishment up to a complete year ban. Whether or not that happens, we're not sure, but they have asked for one of the harshest punishments ever handed out in football. That is what has been suggested. So we shall see.
Okay, Trini, what's the dog's name, please?
Winnie.
Winnie. Very cute. What kind of dog?
She's a golden retriever.
Oh, golden retriever.
Oh, she just crapped on the couch. How that is so cute.
No, she'll jump off the couch
so
and do it on.
Tranny, it's good to see you.
Thank you very much, Tranny
Kuznarek.
Speaking with NBC Sports anchor and reporter Tranny Kuznarek. Coming up, the executive director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, Carol Rose, on the Supreme Court. So you think this year's rulings were disastrous? Well, just wait. She'll fill us in. She's next, Carol Rose. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, and we are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and Friday from the Boston Public Library.
Support for GBH comes from you and the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, providing resources and tools to help you navigate the college planning process, including customized plans of savings, loans, and guidance. More information at mefa.org. And Compassion International, a humanitarian aid and child sponsorship organization dedicated to the long-term development of children living in poverty around the world. Learn more at compassion.com/radio. And Hebrew Senior Life, a Harvard Medical School affiliate empowering seniors to reach their full potential with senior living, healthcare, aging research, and more. You can consider Hebrew Senior Life at allweareforyou.org.
Trusted, local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Ahead on Boston Public Radio, we're live at the Boston Public Library. In a couple of minutes, we'll be joined by Carol Rose, Executive Director of the ACLU of Massachusetts. So you think the Supreme Court went rogue this term? Wait till next. Carol will describe the court's full agenda and the one case out of North Carolina which could be the ultimate democracy killer.
Ahead of the 7th day of the House Select Committee's January 6 hearings, we'll be joined by Suffolk County Sheriff Andrew Cabral. This time around, the focus is expected to center on former President Trump's ties to the extremist groups like the Oath Keepers who stormed the U.S. Capitol 2.5 years ago. At 1 p.m., we'll take those hearings live. All that's to come ahead. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Amy Held. Starting next hour, lawmakers will seek to link the Trump White House with the extremists who attacked the Capitol on January 6th of last year. NPR's Claudia Grisales reports on this latest hearing.
Select Committee aides said the hearing will show how then-President Trump grew more desperate in the weeks before January 6 and summoned the mob. They'll also detail proposed schemes discussed at the Trump White House to overturn the 2020 election results, such as the seizure of voting machines. Committee Democratic members Jamie Raskin of Maryland and Stephanie Murphy of Florida will lead the presentation. Aides said they're withholding the names of witnesses due to security concerns, though NPR has independently confirmed a former spokesman for the extremist Oath Keepers group, Jason Van Tatenhove of Colorado, will testify about the group's history. Claudia Grisales, NPR News, Washington.
Tonight, President Biden heads to the Middle East for his first trip there since entering the White House. NPR's Asma Khalid has more.
The president's main goal is to maintain stability in the region. Jake Sullivan is Biden's national security advisor.
This trip will reinforce a vital American role in a strategically consequential region. And also, it will reinforce that our role is different today than it was 20 years ago on the eve of the war in Iraq.
The president's first stop is Israel. He'll also visit the West Bank in an attempt to renew a relationship with Palestinians that was severely strained under the Trump administration. Then Biden will head to Saudi Arabia. He has said his goal is to reorient, not rupture, relations with a country that has been a strategic partner for 80 years. Asma Khalid, NPR News.
The White House says it is strategizing to manage the more transmissible Omicron variant now dominating across the U.S. and driving a wave of reinfections. Top infectious disease doctor Anthony Fauci says those infected with earlier variants do not appear to have good protection against BA.5. To keep up, officials are looking into new treatments and vaccines.
We are doing now, and it is critical to do so, to develop the next generation of vaccines and therapeutics. And for that, we do need the support of the Congress in resources for us.
The White House says it is focusing on providing access to the vaccines and medications available now because they still protect against serious disease. Some public health officials are warning the U.S. is lagging in its response to another virus, monkeypox, with missteps reminiscent of the early days of the coronavirus pandemic. Hundreds of monkeypox cases are confirmed across the country, but with limited testing, there are likely far more going undetected. The Biden administration is rolling out hundreds of thousands of doses of vaccines, but so far, demand is exceeding the available supply. You're listening to NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro in Brookline. And would it really be summer without a few thunderstorm watchers? A cold front is expected to sweep through the Bay State this afternoon, bringing with it potentially severe thunderstorms and damaging wind gusts, according to the National Weather Service. Both AccuWeather and the Weather Service are forecasting a warm and humid start to the afternoon, with storms likely hitting after 3 o'clock this afternoon in western part of the state and in the mid part of the state out in Worcester. And the down south on the South Shore, there's only a slight chance of thunderstorms, and coastal area might see a few scattered showers as well, but nothing too damaging. But if you do hear some thunderstorms and some lightning rolling through, it's not the J6 hearing. It is just the weather because of the oncoming cold front. Massachusetts Police Licensing Commission is looking at new policies that would regulate how it handles public records requests from people seeking information about law enforcement officers. The Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission has recertified thousands of police officers across Massachusetts ahead of a July 1st deadline, and Post officials say a number of public records requests have come in for information collected during that recertification process or in connection with disciplinary matters. However, with no formal policy in place, an attorney for the commission says the organization could face legal consequences for releasing information about an officer that the state prohibits public entities from having. But the call for guidelines also comes at a time when there is heightened focus on policing right here in the United States. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include DuckDuckGo, committed to making privacy online simple. Used by tens of millions, they offer internet privacy with one download. DuckDuckGo, privacy simplified at duckduckgo.com.
Mr. Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, hour number 2. We are broadcasting live, as we do every Tuesday and Friday at the Boston Public Library, and we are also streaming online.
I'm not telling you. Where are we streaming at? You have to guess.
On YouTube.
Yeah, and what YouTube where?
I don't know. The instructions are erased. So.
YouTube.com/GBH News.
YouTube.com.
It's only because I wrote it down. I had no idea
GBH.
what it was either. So we're joined now in an attempt to discuss the imminent end of democracy by Carol Rose. Carol's the Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. Carol, it's good to see you.
It's great to be here.
So, Carol Rose, after reading these stories last night about the next term of the Supreme Court, I about had a heart attack because I'm still trying to struggle with what the Supreme Court did this term. I know the ACLU doesn't get involved in political candidate picking, but is there a role at all for the ACLU in terms of what seems to be looking like a reckless Supreme Court with corruption?
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, the ACLU focuses both on defending democracy and defending liberty. And so the ACLU has a role to play in the courts, in state legislatures and Congress, and also in public education, which is, of course, also the business that you all are in. And I'm glad to hear you're alarmed, Marjorie, because if you're not alarmed, then you're not paying attention. And there's a lot to be alarmed about, but there's a lot of work that we can do, too, to really make a difference.
Wait a second. We'll get to work on individual matters in a minute. How about structurally? Do you get involved in any of that? I mean, Nancy Gertner, as you know, we all know well, and is a regular here. And Larry Tribe, I think, was the other local. We're on the President Biden's committee on the Supreme Court. They, as we've discussed ad nauseum here, ended up leaning in the direction of expansion of the court as a recommendation. There was no formal recommendation by the committee, by this group as such. Do you get involved in any of those structural reform issues?
We don't, because we appear in front of the court so often. I mean, the ACLU is in front of the court more often than any other group except the Department of Justice itself.
Is that so, really?
It really is,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
So, but, I think there's been a lot of talk about different things that could be done. And, historically, the court hasn't been, immune from change. There were a lot of times in the 1800s and up till 1942 when there was a lot of efforts to change the court. And one of the things a lot of people have talked about...
Not efforts, it's been done.
I mean, it's been
like
done,
9 times or something
exactly.
in American history.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's unprecedented or anything like that. And when the founders wrote the Constitution, they didn't see that there should be judicial supremacy. They thought that there should be equal power among the 3 branches. So I think that there's a lot of room for reform that could happen.
But one of the things I think is so upsetting to people is we're about to hear day 7 of these January 6th committee hearings.
Right.
Is you've got Clarence Thomas sitting there at the Supreme Court, whose wife is up to her eye teeth in trying to...
She's an insurrectionist.
She's an insurrectionist. Right. And how can people have faith in the court if Clarence Thomas is going to vote on anything having to do with the January 6th insurrection.
Well, you're absolutely right. And in fact, people don't have faith in the court right now. I mean, I think the latest poll shows that only 25% of people have faith in the Supreme Court right now. So really the power has to, the action needs to happen not just in the court, but also online and in the streets and in state legislatures. And frankly, a lot of the action right now is moving to the states, which is where Massachusetts has such a crucial role to play as a beacon of liberty.
You know, before we get to the horror of the next term, particularly this North Carolina case, which to me could signal the end, literally the end of small d democracy, I want to touch on what you said. I wasn't going to bring this up, but since you did, Margie and I were talking before, the fear I have is no matter what anybody says, I've read a decent number of books about the Supreme Court. It is a political entity. It's always been a political entity, never as bad as this. But the way the world thinks does matter on issues, even though it obviously doesn't matter to this court. My fear is they did guns. They took away the power of the EPA, and obviously worse, their Dobbs ruling on abortion. I would argue that the response of the American people to this horrific precedent-stripping thing has been, and I'll be kind, timid. And I would argue that the message it sends to the Thomases and the Kavanaughs and the Coney Barretts and the Gorsuches and maybe Roberts, who knows, is we can get away with almost anything. We just overturned a precedent that a few of us swore on a Bible we would honor.
Right.
I think it was Kavanaugh, had to go out the back entrance of a exit of a restaurant because there were protesters outside. Big deal. They have security at home so that they can be protected from protesters and that sort of thing. Don't you worry that the response is the lack of a response is sending a signal to the Supreme Court that they can go as rogue as they want to go?
Well, sure, but I think right now the issue is what's going to happen in the midterms. And I think if the people rise up and vote and move out and show up and protest, I mean, right now we don't know what the response is yet because it's not over yet. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us as people who care about this country, as patriots, small p patriots, to go ahead and say what we want from the court. And I agree with you, Jim. It's incredibly concerning.
One last thing.
But I think we have no choice but to fight back. This is our historic moment.
One last thing. I thought, apparently stupidly, that John Roberts, much more conservative than my politics, but that he was concerned about the image of the Supreme Court and the legacy of the Supreme Court and all that kind of stuff. He couldn't wait to remark on the leak from the Supreme Court, on the Alito decision that became, the final Dobbs decision. He said nothing about Clarence Thomas and his wife.
Right.
So what's that? How does he not see that that's a huge problem?
Well, I think timid is the right word, Marjorie. And I think that he has an obligation to step forward, but he's lost control of this court. I mean, this is now a purely ideological court.
Clarence Thomas's court.
This is Clarence Thomas's court. And there's nothing consistent in these opinions. There's nothing about stare decisis or even originalism. What this is about is a raw exercise of power. And we see that, when it comes to abortion health care, they're willing to say it goes to the states. But when it comes to things like gun control or federal or state money going to religious schools in Maine or gun control in New York, suddenly the states' rights doesn't matter anymore.
Exactly.
So let's just be really clear. This isn't a court that's grounded in principles or anything like that. They're grounded in a Republican political agenda, a right-wing Republican political agenda that they're trying to push forward, and they're going to come up with reasons after the fact to justify why they're doing so. And I think that's the greatest threat to our democracy, certainly in my lifetime.
Okay, speaking of threat to our democracy, without giving people a headache, meaning let's not get lost in the weeds, Moore versus Harper is this North Carolina case that to me seems potentially worse than them all. Can you explain the issue in this case in lay people's terms?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an effort that's been around for a long time. It's a really dubious political theory that reads the Constitution that says that state legislatures have a right to determine the method of voting in a given state, right? That makes sense. But the notion, and normally what that would mean is state legislatures as controlled and with checks and balances from state courts, right, would say that you have the right to do it. But instead, what the independent state legislature doctrine says is that state legislatures get to do whatever they want without any oversight by state courts. So in this case, where the North Carolina courts ruled that trying to gerrymander, doing political gerrymandering in a way that
by the Republicans in North Carolina,
and the Republican court actually threw out the map, the voting districting map, and said that it's gerrymandered in a way that violates the state constitution.
They'd have to do with black voters, didn't
Right,
it? Yes.
right. And so it violates, it's both racial gerrymandering and partisan gerrymandering. And so the North Carolina State Court threw it out and said it's violates the Constitution. And what the case now that they're appealing up to the Supreme Court and the court has agreed to review says is that the state courts don't have a right to oversee it because the Constitution says we'll defer to state legislatures and doesn't say we'll refer to state legislatures as overseen by state courts.
And by the way, we just lived through in these hearings today at 1 o'clock, we're bringing you day 7 of the hearings live. We just lived through the fake elector fiasco brought on by Donald Trump and his sycophants. And this would essentially, to me, codify the ability of these legislators to do what Trump tried but failed to do. And by the way, for those who don't see this as a threat, the people pushing this are the Republican leaders in North Carolina. Our colleagues did a little research today. If you think, well, it's just southern states that are red states anyway, here's a quiz for the two of you. Who controls both branches of the legislature in Wisconsin? Not a southern state. That's right, the Republicans. How about Ohio? The Republicans. How about Michigan with a Democratic governor? The Republicans. How about Pennsylvania with their Democratic governor? Republicans. Missouri the same way. I mean, this is not just like some of us were seen as chicken littles when we said this is where they're going on abortion. No, they're not. They were not going to do this. This is where they're going on democracy.
Absolutely.
And the ability to declare whoever legislators want to declare as the winner of a presidential election in a state in 2024 could be totally a function of how the Supreme Court rules on this. And by the way, Alito, as crackpot as this, as you call it, independent state legislature theory is, Alito, Gorsuch, and Thomas have already been on the record saying they think it's something that should be seriously entertained.
Well, and the fact
by
that
the court,
and the fact that the court is taking it up means
exactly
that at least four of the justices
You're absolutely right.
want to hear this, and so it's really a tremendously fragile time for our democracy and time for all of us to pay attention. As hard as it is to pay attention right now, we have to, both here in Massachusetts and across the country. And here in Massachusetts, we have to take steps to strengthen our democracy because when all these other states begin to fall, we are going to be a haven for so many people who want to still live in a democracy. And we need to do that. And then we need to have a plan. And this is what the ACLU is working on. We have
millions of people
battleground state strategy and a border state strategy and a southern state strategy. But we in Massachusetts have an obligation, I would say, and an opportunity to try to shift that momentum. And we need to think not in 2-year terms, but in 10-year terms, because that's what the Republicans did when they started to build this at the state legislative level back in 2010.
I haven't done the math, and my apologies. I'm going to do it for tomorrow's show. But it seems to me those 5 swing states that I mentioned, a bunch of which were won by Joe Biden, I do think that if this Moore versus Harper case had been the law of the land in 2020, it is not far-fetched to suggest Donald Trump would have won a second term
and
as
president. And that's why they're pushing it.
Yeah.
And that's why this is such a dangerous time for a democracy and why we all need to pay attention and vote and raise our voices and not back down.
Yeah, you're both lawyers. I'm not. Why is it that you can make a law for every state about guns and not every state about other things? I mean, it doesn't. Either we have federal. You know what I mean?
Right.
You want me to play Supreme? I can play Supreme Court.
Okay, go ahead.
In this one, I don't like the decisions. There's no right to privacy in the Constitution, so we're throwing abortion back to the states. They say there is a Second Amendment. And the way we've interpreted the Second Amendment says the Supreme Court, you want to own a nuclear bomb, you can own a nuclear bomb. That's a federal policy explicitly, which is BS.
About voting in the Constitution the
also
federal
should be
government.
protected.
Wasn't this what the Federalist Papers were about?
But see, Marjorie, you're looking for consistency and principles
Exactly
and logic,
right.
and that's not what we're seeing from the Supreme Court. What we're seeing is a real ideological court that's doing an ideological end run and using the Constitution to justify it.
Right, how do we get to the goal?
Right.
We decide what we want to do as the Supreme Court, and then we figure out the route there. And if it's it's inconsistent, it's inconsistent.
I mean,
who's going to overrule them?
As Sotomayor says, there really is a stench upon the court right now. It's a crisis in the court that we haven't seen before, certainly not in my lifetime, but I don't even think in the whole
And what's the
history.
end game?
I think the end game is that you have an agenda where you roll back equal marriage, you roll back the access to get contraception. You roll back arguably interracial marriage if the
Won't the pharmaceutical
reasoning and
companies be
going
upset
forward.
about contraception? They make a lot of money on contraception, don't
Well, not
they?
to mention the young people. I mean, I think that right now is the moment for all of us to get involved because we're really talking about fighting not for our rights, but for the rights of the next generation. And we need to mobilize people. And that's where we're focusing a lot of our energy at the ACLU, is how do we mobilize? And so, yes, we'll fight in the courts, but if the courts are shut down at the federal level, we'll fight in the state courts. And if the state courts get shut down, we'll fight in the legislature. If the legislature is shut down, we'll take to the streets, online and on the streets. So we have to use all of the tools in our toolkit to defend our democracy right now. And places like Massachusetts, where we have a little bit more breathing room to do that, have an obligation not to assume that, well, our rights are protected, so we're okay, but to actually move forward and begin to work to protect those rights across the
But I've
country.
said this to Jim about a million times, so why not say it to you as well? I read this piece somewhere, which I thought was very compelling a couple of weeks ago. Of course, I can't remember where I read it. But what it essentially said was that a lot of these things are wedge issues, that get people all worked up. And it's really not about that Mitch McConnell really doesn't care one way or the other about abortion.
Right.
But what's it about is making sure that corporate America basically runs the United States, workers' rights are decimated, and there is a
it's about power.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking about power here. And I think it's really important for people to sort of take off the rose-colored glasses and to recognize that we're in a battle for our democracy and a battle for the next generation. And are we going to leave them a planet that's destroyed? Are we going to leave them a democracy that's destroyed? Or are we going to rise up and take action? And if we need to, march in the streets to make sure that these rights are protected. And that's where I'm ready to go. And I think that's where the ACLU is ready.
I think most of our listeners, as soon as Amazon Prime Day is over, are willing to march in the streets too. But there's today and tomorrow. We're talking to Carol Rose. If only I were kidding. We're talking to Carol Rose, as head of the Civil Liberties Union in Massachusetts. So at least one more case on the agenda that obviously matters a lot in Massachusetts. We are likely a few months, well, maybe a year away, 10 months away, 11 months away from the end of whatever vestige of affirmative action there is in higher education. Yet another precedent reversing move by this. It's Harvard and is it North Carolina? Whatever the second.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the second one is, but it's
Harvard
definitely
is one
Harvard.
of the two
so,
places.
I mean, Justice Roberts has made it clear for a long time now that he wants to dismantle affirmative action completely. And so we know that where his vote is going to be going. And so presumably they're going to really this will be the death knell of affirmative action. They're going to be, and there are two cases before the court, one involving Harvard that basically says that they can't take race into account in their admissions decisions. And so this is going to be devastating.
Did Brian write the last decision on this? I can't remember.
No,
who
Roberts wrote the last.
Roberts. But the issue, if I remember correctly, the issue was that the court determined that it can be an issue in determining who gets in, not the issue or the exclusive issue. Can't be the only issue, but it can be one when you're deciding with your student.
Can it be an issue
at all?
Right. And so, I mean, so much of the equality work that we've seen, the equality gains that we've seen, and the right to education is so fundamental, and equality of access to education is so fundamental. And to take away the ability of these universities to try to have a more diverse and equitable admissions process is really devastating for the universities, not just for the students of color, but for all students who learn and need to be exposed to a diverse range of colleagues and other students. And if that's taken away, we're all impoverished by that.
Okay, here's another non-loyal question. Can they get around this with using socioeconomics? That we're going to set aside a certain amount of our spaces for kids, white kids or kids of color that are poor?
Sure, they can do that to some extent, but increasingly that's not going to work exclusively. But that is one way to do it. You could do people who are first generation in their families. Frankly, getting rid of legacy admissions would do a lot to make sure that we don't have continuing
so that's what I'm
discrimination
asking. Like
over
in
time.
impact, could schools find a way to get around this ruling so they'd still have a diverse campus? It just wouldn't be, even if they get rid of the affirmative action places, they could get around it.
I think they could, try to get around it, and I'm sure that they will try to get around it because of the importance of diversity in a student population for learning for all people. But what a shame that we're at a place in our country where we can't admit that this country has a history of racism, not to mention chattel slavery, that we still are trying to rebound from, and that we need to be, conscious and deliberate and not secretive about trying to overcome that. So yeah, it might force it underground, but hopefully these universities will continue to find ways to ensure that there's more diversity in education.
I know you're not a sociologist, but let's talk about that for a second. What happens? We know how extremists react when they're unhappy with the state of democracy. We're going to have a former spokesperson for the Oath Keepers testifying today, somewhat time after 1 o'clock. A guy who came up from, I can't remember what state he came, on January 6th, an Ohio guy who came talking about the treason of people like Pelosi and Justice Roberts and Biden. Some of the testimony today. How do normal people, let's call it Team Normal, to quote whoever said that. Who said Team Normal?
Stepien, I think, wasn't it?
Was it Stepien?
I think
yeah.
so.
Yeah. Okay. How about Team Normal, meaning average people in this country? What happens when they, as they have, lose faith in essentially all institutions? I mean, Joe Biden's support is in the low 30s.
Right.
Even a vast majority of Democrats don't want him to run for another term. Congress has virtually no support from either side because it's totally dysfunctional. As you said, only 25% of Americans support the court of the United States. What happens to a democracy when the vast majority of people don't believe in any of the three major institutions that control your life?
Well, I think, Jim, you're absolutely right. We are in a historic moment of crisis for our democracy. And when I first came to the ACLU, we used to talk about there's democracy and liberty, and we don't use them interchangeably, because democracy is making sure that every vote is counted, people have a right to vote, and liberty is making sure the majority doesn't use that vote to suppress the rights of the minorities. But mostly our ACLU work was on liberty interests. Now, a huge amount of our work is on actually trying to preserve the institutions of democracy itself. And when we lose that, then the liberty interests also become sacrificed. So this is a fundamental moment, and I think we have to start first by recognizing what's wrong and naming it and talking about it the way we are today. I think that's tremendously important. And then second, democracy is a muscle, and we have to be engaged in it and use it. And one of the things that we're doing here in Massachusetts is working at the local level in towns and cities. So when we were talking about the driver's license bills, when we were talking about trying to put bans on face surveillance technology, we started at the very local level and get people engaged and involved, whether it's their school boards or their town meetings, these kinds of things, and then up to the state legislature and the state courts. And then hopefully, like we did with equal marriage, we begin to turn the tide federally. But we can't think we're going to do this in the short run. We have to have a 5, 10, 15-year strategy. I mean, it's a terrible irony. The older I get, the longer my time frame becomes for change, right? But I really think we have to be willing to have that kind of strategy and patience and a long-term vision if we're going to actually turn the tide on this, because our very democracy is on the line right now.
You also mentioned, you were intimating before, that one of the key things is mobilizing young people at the correct position on this. That's the conventional wisdom, but I used a poll last night when I was talking to the people I mentioned to you, Marjorie, from Yale, who had done this study of 1,300 corporations in this country, and how many of them, was 120 so far, first movers they call them, are paying their employees to go to a state where abortion is legal if they work in a state where it is not legal. What was the point I was trying to make? What did you just...
Maybe that they were supporting both sides? They were supporting both sides?
No, I can't remember where I was going with that. I can't remember where I was going with that thing.
Well, but that is an important point you made before, though, that on the one hand, they're supporting people to fly to wherever to get an abortion. On the other hand, they're funding all the politicians.
Well, it's not all. That was AT&T and a few others. That was not the bulk of the 120 corporations that are doing that.
It was
but
very
I think
upsetting.
Here on Amazon Day, I think it's important that we know that as consumers, we have power, that workers need more power.
Oh, I know what it
and
was.
Have power.
I'm sorry.
And we need to exercise whatever power we do to try to demand that our democracy be protected.
The poll that I used last night, it was a morning consult poll, showed that there was a generational divide, and not in the way I'd expect in terms of supporting corporations taking positions on the issue of abortion to protect the rights of women. Overwhelmingly, Gen Zs were in favor, 50-some%. baby boomers, somewhere like 30%.
that
So the
right?
guy who has the right idea, in my estimation, Bill McKibben, who's a regular on our show, started the climate movement.
He's wonderful.
With that group called Third Act, which I think is thirdact.org,
Yep.
which is attempting to organize, I think it's 60 plus or 65 plus, was formed with Norman Lear and Jane Fonda and him and whatever's. Don't assume that people who've seen democracy at its best are its fiercest defenders. Apparently, at least according to this abortion issue, older people who, when they called our show, said, I remember living through what it was like prior to 1973 and Roe, they need a hell of a lot of attention too. And the problem, I know it's a tired old theme, the best thing we could do to fight back against the rogue Supreme Court is abolish Twitter and Facebook, because it has become essentially, social media has become the replacement for real action.
Well, it looks like Elon Musk is doing his best to destroy Twitter.
Well, that's a very good point, by the way. That is
but
a very good
I was
point.
listening last night to something or other and talking about how Paul Ryan, was former Speaker of the House, was very upset with President Trump. He didn't like all this talk about the fake election, but he sits on the board of Fox News. So
I didn't know that.
Why does he do that? Well, I guess he gets a lot of money to do that, and so that's part of it too. The increasing shamelessness about great wealth and greed. Yeah.
No, greed is definitely the enemy of democracy.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to get rid of greed, but we can take steps to defend democracy. And I think every person needs to understand that there's no one else coming in to do it. It's up to each of us. Those of us who have power, privilege, citizenship, being part of that power and privilege, have an obligation not just to vote, but to get engaged, to involve our families and our friends and our colleagues, and to make people understand that this is the moment. And if we care about the future of our country, this is the moment that we need to band together and raise our voice. And we in Massachusetts have the luxury of being able to do that, and we need to do
Well,
that.
to a point. Let me end on this, a positive and a negative note. The positive note, as you've intimated, is both Charlie Baker, a nanosecond after the Dobbs case, came out with an executive order attempting to protect women and providers coming here from other states. The legislature, which we criticize quite often, is about to put on his desk a codification of that. Having said that, and this is a theme I know people are tired of me saying, this abortion issue is going to evolve. We're going to find out worse things done by individual states in the months ahead.
Absolutely.
Yet the legislature in Massachusetts that we're praising has decided yet again it is fine to go home for August, September, October, November, and December in a year where democracy is hanging by a thread. If they really cared about the issues we're all talking about, they would decide just for this 1 year, they should actually work the whole year and be in session. So when they are needed to protect things that are being done away with in other states, these damn legislators would be doing their jobs.
Well, you know, they did it the last time, and they can do it this time. I agree with you, Jim.
Stick around. Hey, Carol, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for your time, Carol Rose.
Thank you very much, Carol Rose. We've been speaking with the ACLU of Massachusetts President Carol Rose. Coming up, Massachusetts Public Safety, former Public Safety Secretary Andrew Cabral to set us up for these hearings that are going to start at 1 o'clock today, the January 6th hearings on the insurrection at the Capitol. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, and we are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Maine Maritime Museum, presenting Zach Horn, Looking for Winslow Homer, an installation inspired by the same rhythmic beauty of the sea captured by Homer, now through November 27th. MaineMaritimeMuseum.org. And the Museum of Science, where you can discover something new each time you visit. Summertime is limited, though your experiences at the Museum of Science are not. Tickets at MOS.org. And Rockport Music, presenting the Rockport Jazz Festival at its Seaside Chelinlu Performance Center, August 3rd through 7th. Pianist Fred Hirsch, violinist Regina Carter, The Bad Plus, and more. Details at rockportmusic.org. And Comcast. Xfinity Internet is committed to bringing speeds over a gig to power your devices while fitting your needs and a range of budgets. Learn more at xfinity.com/gig.
Welcome Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Brody, Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. In about 27 minutes, we're going to switch to a hearing room in Washington. And by the way, the January 6th committee has been quite prompt, I should say, so I assume it will start on time, with lawmakers honing in on the involvement and coordination of extremist groups like the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, the QAnon conspiracy movement. Joining us now to preview the hearings a bit and lay out what we know so far is Andrew Cabral. Andrew's the former public safety secretary from Massachusetts. Andrew, good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Hey, so Andrea, let's start with a story that really upset me from the New York Times, talking about the Justice Department's role in investigating former President Donald Trump. They talked about how the electrifying public testimony delivered was it last month? Was it June?
Well, yeah, because it was the end of June. Yeah.
I guess it was the end of June. By Cassidy Hutchinson, a former White House aide who was chief aide to Mark Meadows, the chief of staff to the president. Her testimony jolted top Justice Department officials into discussing the topic of Mr. Trump more directly in the presence of Attorney General Merrick P. Garland and his Deputy Attorney General Lisa O. Monaco. The basic piece here is that the Justice Department is just kind of cruising along, appearing to be bordering on paralysis, while the committee unloads all these truths that they apparently were unaware of when they're the ones with the real tough subpoena power. It made the Justice Department look pretty pathetic, I guess, and I found it very disturbing.
I have to agree with you, especially, what's particularly galling about it is that this is a Justice Department that could have indicted Trump on the findings from the Mueller report on obstruction of justice.
That's right.
Which was very, very clear. Which
10
Mueller
counts.
himself testified to, basically said, well, the reason that we didn't do anything while he was president is because of this, sort of silly Department of Justice memo about not being able to indict a sitting president. But he was asked directly whether or not Trump could be indicted once he was out of office, and Mueller said yes. So you literally have enough to indict on a crime that occurred while he was in office, predating the January 6th insurrection and his incitement of it, well predating that. I would have thought that they would have already had that at least on their radar screen. I always wondered why no indictment had come down since Merrick Garland had taken office. But he should have been on their radar screen so sufficiently as a result of all of the other indictable things that he did. I mean, this is a twice impeached president. We're not talking about somebody who, was Mother Teresa in the eyes of the public and as far as anybody knew up until January 6th. This is someone who had emoluments clause violations, someone who had obstruction of justice issues, any one of a number of corruption issues. He should have been on the radar screen of the Department of Justice from the moment he left office and the Biden administration came in. So, yeah, I mean, I don't always agree with what the New York Times writes and how they write it. I think they sometimes go overboard to be critical of Democrats, as they did, all constantly with Hillary Clinton. So I don't always agree with them, but I will say that as someone who's prosecuted lots and lots of cases myself, it just, for any of this to have come as a big surprise to them, any of the evidence that's been developed to have come as a big surprise to them is disappointing, to say the least.
So, Andrew Cabral, what we understand is today is basically to talk about these lunatic, extremist, white supremacist groups, Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, QAnon, etc. Not only what they did leading up to January 6th, but on January 6th, what coordination was there, but in addition, what coordination, if any, was there with people close to Donald Trump? That is the centerpiece, from what you understand, that today led by Jamie Raskin from Maryland and Stephanie Murphy from Florida. That's the centerpiece of what we're going to hear starting at 1 o'clock, correct?
Yes, and I think there's a guy who was the former spokesperson.
Jason Van Tattenhove is his name.
Yeah.
For the Oath Keepers.
Yeah. He considered himself to be a journalist. I think based on an interview I saw with him, thought he would be writing a book about this. He considered himself to be sort of in it but not of it, to quote Stevie Wonder. and then realized that he was actually of it as well, and grew uncomfortable with it. This is according to his own recitation, and ultimately ended up leaving. He's apologized and said he was wrong for being involved with him. But he's, as sort of essentially the Oath Keepers' chief propagandist, his testimony, I think, will be incredibly enlightening in terms of how they received signals from the White House and who they got those signals from and how they acted in furtherance of them, and how the Oath Keepers recruit, how they retain members, and what their goals are. I mean, the guy who's the head of the Oath Keepers, I always forget this guy's first name.
Stuart Rhodes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, says all he ever wants to do is fight. And he was waiting for that signal. And many of the people who've been arrested, you could hear the crowd saying, the president sent us. This is a simple case of message sent and message received. And I think we're going to hear a lot about who those intended recipients were and just how dangerous they are, because they're not fringe anymore. They are part and parcel of the Republican Party. They've taken over Miami-Dade elections. They basically are the Miami-Dade Republican Party. Enrique Tarrio used to be a member of Latinos for Trump in Florida, and that's how he kind of graduated into this role as the head of the Proud Boys. And they really are mainstream. If Roger Stone and Mike Flynn are using Oath Keepers and Proud Boys as security, begs the question is, what do you need security for? That's mainstream Republican. And they're not using them for security. They're using them to plan an insurrection.
By the way, they acknowledge, when you said if they are using, meaning since they use, they acknowledge openly
yes.
that was their purpose. Many people think more. We're going to hear a lot about a tweet that Trump sent out on December 19th. Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there, will be wild. And we'll hear what the response, and a lot of Oath Keepers and QAnon nuts and Proud Boys thought he was speaking to them. And it really didn't just start there. I'm sure people remember this. This is Trump a year ago today, by the way, at a presidential debate, obviously with Joe Biden, being pressed by Chris Wallace and Biden to denounce the white supremacists supporting him. And here's a little bit of Trump, Wallace, and Biden.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. You want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and
Proud Boys. Stand back and stand by.
Stand back and stand by, which the Proud Boys, at least from what I've heard so far, saw as a call directly to them. And from what I understand, we'll hear today that their membership exploded immediately after that debate when Donald Trump was verbally messaging them. We're talking to Andrea Cabral.
Just to get back to what I started with, the Department of Justice, tell people what they can do. I mean, I know they want to subpoena all the testimony from the committee, and the committee at some point is going to give it to them. Correct me if I'm wrong. They don't want to give it to in the middle of their, the middle of their doing this, because it will kind of supplant, take the fire out of all the work they've done. But the Department of Justice can do what, Andrea Cabral, regarding these hearings and the former president and the people that helped him?
Well, they have the most substantial means in law enforcement to investigate, to bring people in. Now, you can always tell the FBI that you don't wish to speak to them. That's your right. But once you do speak with the FBI, it is a crime to lie to the FBI, just like it's a crime to lie to Congress.
Right.
So the ability to bring people in over and over again, if you have to, lock them into a version of events or a story, is really a huge resource in terms of investigation. And they have the right to open up a grand jury. They can open up a secret grand jury. I mean, most grand juries are secret, but they can open up a grand jury that's sort of an investigative grand jury that has the power in and of itself to subpoena records. So a prosecutor would go in, may have some records, some documents, some evidence to put before them, and then the grand jury itself can ask for whatever it wants, and then a subpoena will issue for that, and you can't flout that subpoena. You can move to quash it, but if it's not quashed, you have to produce what's being asked in it. and they have the power to hold people as material witnesses. And they have the power to have warrants issued if people fail to respond to a subpoena. So I think we've learned a lot about the contempt of Congress power, which had not up until this point really been exercised or even needed to really be exercised. But I think, the committee here and the Democrats in Congress have actually finally explored that power to great effect, because Steve Bannon, now facing a trial for contempt and almost certain jail time if he is convicted, and apparently has no defense, even by the recitation of the judge on the case, has no defenses left, valid ones to offer. People now realize what happens when you fail to comply with a subpoena from Congress. Most people know anyway what happens when you fail to comply with the Department of Justice.
Well, by the way, my understanding is in two of those cases where the committee has referred criminal contempt charges to DOJ, I think it's Navarro and Scavino, for reasons unexplained, they did not proceed. And I want to talk about the Bannon thing for a minute. I am still confused as to why he's offered to testify, and it seems to me there are only three possibilities. One, he offered and said he wants to testify publicly first, means he wants to do some lunatic thing about how the committee is a witch hunt and Donald Trump is the savior. That's one. They're obviously going to say no to that, and he knows that because every other witness has testified in private first before they've testified publicly. So I assume he knows that's not going to happen. Two, he's doing it because he's worried about, Marjorie and I have a disagreement about this, about losing, which he will, his criminal trial and being sentenced to jail time. Marjorie and I disagree because Marjorie thinks that worries him, and it sounds like you do too. I think it would make him a martyr in the insurrectionist crowd if he did 6 months in jail. He'd be even more powerful than he was before,
And
which leads me...
He might be very traumatized by 6 months in jail.
Well, maybe he would.
Too.
Maybe you're right. But the third thing is, this is total BS on Bannon's part. He knows they're going to say no. He wanted to offer it so he can use it as some sort of, whatever, to lessen his jail sentence if he's convicted. And it's purely a ploy. And by the way, I should have mentioned, there's a letter that was given to the committee from Donald Trump saying that he waived executive privilege when it comes to Bannon, even though most experts say there was no executive privilege because at the time in question, Bannon wasn't working at the White House. He was a consultant. So which of the three, door number 1, 2, or 3, what do you think is motivating the Bannon thing here?
Well, I completely agree with you. There is no privilege here. So that letter was just nonsense. It was just more Trump nonsense and more Bannon nonsense, making it look like Trump was offering to give up something that he never had right to give up. But I think it's a bit of all three. Probably a little bit more of, if I remember correctly, the first thing that you mentioned. So he knows right now that he's going to trial. The judge has said, no, you're not delaying the trial's starting on Monday. All of the defenses, all the motions that he filed to assert these so-called affirmative defenses have been found to be completely invalid and been denied by the judge, to the point where his own lawyer in the last hearing said, well, what's the point of going to trial if we don't have any defenses? To which the judge, Nichols, who was appointed by Trump, said to him, agreed, you might want to think about that ahead of trial. So he's pretty much looking at a conviction, and I think his lawyers at least know this. I can't imagine Bannon doesn't know it. I think he's in mitigation mode to some degree. So he wants to be able to say at the time of sentencing to the judge that even though this doesn't have anything to do with the fact that he was in contempt by flaunting the subpoena, that he has had a change of heart and did at least offer to help the committee. I don't know how far that's going to go with Nichols. I haven't read anything about him or the trial that indicates to me that that's going to soften it at all. I do think that with Steve Bannon fancies himself to be this master strategist. In fact, that was one of the titles that Trump gave him in the White House. The fact that this guy was in an office 9 feet away from the Oval Office still absolutely floors me. But he considers himself to be the smartest guy in the room, and he invariably is not. But he probably thinks he can figure out a way to outsmart the committee or do something disruptive. Now, that flies in the face of his attempt to mitigate his conduct before the judge. But with Bannon, you never really know. I mean, he literally used his podcast to recruit people to try to overthrow the government.
Yeah, he did.
He wanted to bail out Enrique Tarrio just before the January 6th. Tarrio was in custody because he had vandalized a church where had taken a Black Lives Matter sign. And he was trying to, at least he said, he tried to bail the guy out. So he's knee deep in this. And at the end of the day, what I do think is true, regardless of whether he's got multiple motives or just one, is that Steve Bannon is going to look out for Steve Bannon because that's who he's always looked out for.
Well, you used to run a jail, the Suffolk County jail here, Andrea Cabral. Steve Bannon would be facing, I think, about 6 months in prison is the consensus.
Minimum security federal facility? That's not exactly hard time.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I mean, that's where Martha Stewart went, obviously the women's version of the minimum security federal prison. But you hear scary stories about prison, more about state prison. But what do you think?
Well, I don't think Steve Bannon is ready to do any kind of time at all. The reason that I think that it would be important to get his deposition, certainly I would say if the committee does not want him to testify live, I think that's very wise because he's a disruptor. But to get him in a deposition would be very, very valuable because, while he's doing that 6 months or whatever he might get, plenty of time for all of the additional evidence to be brought to bear and perhaps for him to be indicted while in custody for seditious conspiracy. I mean, he's very good at protecting himself. He always seems to at least verbally show that he's at arm's length away, just out of reach of culpability. But he's not as smart as he thinks he is. And I think the amount of people who are talking now really kind of endangers him. He'd rather be a cooperating witness than to be in jail for longer, or in jail, I think, for any period of time.
Before you go, and by the way, we're about 10 minutes away, assuming they're on schedule, from the beginning of day 7 of the January 6th House Committee hearings. We're apparently going to hear or see some video of Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel's testimony behind closed doors, 8 hours of it, I believe, on Friday. The most significant thing we've heard about Cipollone, I think, so far, is when Cassidy Hutchinson, as Marjorie said, the former aide to the chief of staff of the White House, Mark Meadows, was testifying. She talked about what Cipollone allegedly said to her ahead of January 6th about if Donald Trump were to go to the Capitol and such things. Here is Hutchinson.
I saw Mr. Cipollone right before I walked out onto West Exec that morning, and Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, "Please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen."
I mean, I have no idea how much he said, how much was covered by privilege, and he didn't have to say. But in terms of the blockbuster witnesses, it's hard to believe anybody could be bigger than Hutchinson. The chief counsel to the President of the United States at a time of insurrection has got to be a huge moment in these hearings, no?
No, I think it's the comparisons to John Dean are very apt.
He volunteered to come forward, did he not?
Right. I mean, but in terms of the fact of having a White House counsel,
right,
in a congressional hearing like this, testifying to events and conversations to which he was in which he was a direct participant, if not just a witness, even if he said nothing, is just sort of astounding. So that is as credible as Cassidy Hutchinson was, and everyone sort of commented that people were sort of attacking her, saying she wasn't really that close to things, she didn't really know, but nobody really attacked the substance of what she said. And if you watched her, it looked like she was absolutely telling the truth. Now we're hearing the Cipollone doesn't dispute what she said.
Right.
But the level of credibility that comes from a White House counsel, who, keep in mind, his client is the White House. It is not Donald Trump. He advises Donald Trump as the office holder. But his client is the White House. And through the White House, the people, in some respects, the people of the United States. Pat Cipollone is not going to endanger his license. And if he spent as much time as we've heard trying to thwart this lunatic this madman from his worst impulses. I think we're at the stage where he just tells everybody how far he had to go and what he had to do to keep him from doing all of the things he wanted to do.
We only have 30 seconds. How do you get through 2.5 hours of the hearing, Andrea, knowing you as we do?
I can. These I watch with great interest, and the committee has done a fantastic job.
Actually.
With universal
really
consensus.
Andrea, it's good to get your thoughts. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Andrea. See you soon. We've been talking with the former Massachusetts Public Safety Secretary Andrea Cabral, also the former Sheriff of Suffolk County. Up next, we are going to bring you the live coverage of the January 6th committee hearings. They're going to start in 6 minutes, and unless they're late, but they've been pretty prompt.
They have.
Jim and I will chit-chat between now and then. We're taking a few calls. Why not?
Maybe so.
Maybe so if we have time. 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, and we are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Be revolutionary. UMass is the Commonwealth's flagship public research university and committed to the relentless pursuit of progress. Learn more at umass.edu. And South Coast Artists, presenting their 19th annual Open Studio Tour this weekend in Tiverton and Little Compton, Rhode Island, and Dartmouth and Westport, Massachusetts. You can download a tour brochure at southcoastartists.org.